In Antai County, in the central part of a small island in the South China Sea, you will find a place known as Sun Moon Lake. It's a beautiful vacation spot, tucked away in the mountains. On long weekends, tourists from all over the island like to come, relax, and take in the sights. One of the major attractions is a theme park, though this is no ordinary theme park. A short gondola ride up the mountain and you will find yourself at the Formosan Aboriginal Culture Village. This isn't your average theme park. Yes, there's rides and attractions and overly expensive gift stores. But unlike a Six Flags, this place also has another purpose. Here, you can learn all about the 9 Aboriginal tribes native to the island. You can take part in activities like weaving or pottery making, or take an interactive show. The park is staffed by actual members of the remaining tribes, who attempt to give you as real and authentic an experience as possible. 173 kilometers southwest of the Formosan Aboriginal Culture Village, in the modern city of Tainan, is where you'll find the Anping Old Fort, another famous historical tourist attraction. It dates back to 1624 and draws visitors from all over. 177 kilometers even further south will bring you to the serene and relaxing beach town of Kending, a favorite of both tourists and locals. If you decide to venture off the beaches, you can make your way to the Lumbee Lighthouse, near the southernmost point on the island. Venture back north 460 kilometers along the length of the western coastline, and make your way back to Taipei, one of the most vibrant and bustling cities in Asia. With so many sights to see, one of the lesser-known treasures off the beaten path is the Antai Historical House, home to some awesome treasures and very interesting architecture. If you're feeling adventurous, you can then make your way out to the small mountain village of Yufen. Hop on any MRT train and find a way to transfer to the Brown Line, at which time, ride until you hit stop 15, Zhongshan Fuxing. From there, catch the 1062 bus. It's very cheap, but it does take about an hour and a bit. It's filled with bustling market streets and breathtaking views, and according to urban legend, was the actual inspiration for Studio Ghibli's 2001 classic, Spirited Away. Once you're done, head back to Taipei and enjoy the beauty and splendor of the 228 Park, a large, sprawling, open green park that's perfect to take the sunset in. After you're done taking in the sights for the day, you can retire back to the lavish and luxurious Grand Hotel. Uniquely designed, the hotel is a feast for the eyes. Stroll down the hallways and take in the history around you, and learning about the famous previous guests, such as Eisenhower, Thatcher, Mandela, Lee Kuan Yew, among many, many more. Before you lay your head down for the night, why not read a little bit from a book you bought earlier at a cute little bookstore tucked away on the 10th floor of a nondescript building, and whose owner, an old gray man, lives in a small bed behind the counter. All this and more awaits you on this beautiful island, though be aware, there's much more to this island than initially catches the eye. This is an island that has worn many hats and flags over the years, and has had seemingly as many names as well. You might know it by its current popular name, namely Taiwan, or even colloquially as Formosa. But those aren't the only names it has. In fact, that's not even the name it has for itself. The island is part of what is officially known as the Republic of China, not to be confused with the People's Republic of China, or as we commonly call them, China, who refers to the island officially as Taiwan, Province of China. During the Olympics and other sporting events, it also takes the moniker of the deliberately ambiguous Chinese Taipei. This might all sound confusing, but honestly, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the vagaries. This is Taiwan. Things are complicated here. Scratch the surface of anything, and you'll find nothing as simple. Sun Moon Lake, the idyllic vacation spot mentioned earlier, was controversially included in passport pages for the PRC, a country that currently does not, nor ever has, control over it. Anping Old Fort is not its original name. That would be Fort Zeelandia, as it was known when the area was controlled by the Dutch 6 centuries ago. That lighthouse? It was installed because the southern coast of the island was so dangerous that 2 invasion forces, 1 American and 1 Japanese, were needed against the hostile terrains and unwelcoming locals. Jiufen harkens back to the 50 years of Japanese imperialism and its attempt to create a model colony. The 228 Park gets its curious name from the 228 massacre, when on February 28, 1947, revolts began around the island against the fleeing nationalist forces from the mainland, whom in turn killed thousands and began a period of martial law that lasted 38 years and is now known as the White Terror. The Grand Hotel, in all of its grandeur, was built to host VIPs as the occupying nationalists felt there was nowhere else suitable for them in their new base of operations. But what about that cute bookstore with the sweet old man? Surely there's nothing controversial there. Well, the original Causeway Bay Books was located across the water in Hong Kong, and the old man was amongst those arrested for selling books critical of the PRC. The bookstore is now a hub for young Hong Kongers who have fled their homelands and now reside in Taiwan, a friendly ally to their cause. For now. So how did it all get to be so opaque? Why does everything that has to do with this place have to be so complicated, have so many layers? Taiwan is a modern, democratic society with an above-average standard of living and top-notch education and medical standards. And yet, you'd be hard-pressed to find many of these official statistics, because many of the governing boards of NGOs refuse to even acknowledge the existence of this place and its 23 million inhabitants. Why all the doublespeak about whether or not it's a nation, and the political games unlike anywhere else in the world? Think of it this way. Taiwan is somehow both the Israel and the Palestine of Eastern Asia at the same time. How? And more importantly, why? The answer, as many answers are wont to, can be traced back to China, more specifically to the end of the Qing dynasty of the 1800s. You see, unlike places like Kosovo or Somaliland, Taiwan, no matter what any PRC propagandist might say, isn't a rebellious province trying to break free. In fact, it's a rump state, the remnants of the brief experiment with nationalist rule on the mainland. Think of what Byzantium was to the Roman Empire. Though to be fair, it's very different. Our story that I wish to discuss, believe it or not, isn't actually so much about Taiwan, at least in the beginning, but its most recent conquerors. The story I want to tell you is of the end of Chinese imperial rule, the maelstrom that followed, what emerged from that vacuum of power, and its eventual fate. The Nationalist Era of China is an oft romanticized time, like Weimar Germany. But what I want to do is sift through the legends and myths to explain where it came from, what it did while in power, and why it fell. Because believe it or not, it's still around, just hidden away on an island that, depending on whom you ask, may or may not exist. But now we're getting ahead of ourselves. For us, our story begins on January 1st, 1814, in Fuyuan Springs in Canton, with the birth of, believe it or not, the younger brother of Jesus Christ. Yes, that Jesus Christ. Like I said, this is a long and complicated story. Except, that's not where our story actually begins. No particular tale ever really begins or ends on a single date. Not truly, and not least especially any story concerning China. History is a curious thing. Often presented as a line, it's almost better represented by a brick wall. A line, no matter how curved and seemingly random, is continuous, not reliant on what came before, always moving forward. A brick wall is something else entirely. Brick by brick, stacked one on the other, you can only build on what was previously there. A brick or two can be out of place and missing, but while not ideal, it doesn't threaten the entire structure. But if there's too many gaps in knowledge or context, then the whole structure collapses onto itself. It's a delicate process, both malleable and vulnerable. History can only exist as we remember it, how we record it, and as we are imperfect beings, our histories are imperfect by default. There can never be anything as simple or as pure as an unbiased history. 2 + 2 will equal 4 in math, but humans, no matter how hard we try, we will always be the products of flawed histories and politics. We inherit a muddled narrative from those before us, who in turn inherited the same from those before them, and so on and so on. Like a brick wall, we can only build with what we have, and only add onto what was previously there. Simple misunderstandings and petty conflicts may seem inconsequential in the moment, but in the context of history, become new bricks stacked into walls of conflict and animosity, built upon the foundations of 1,000 other seemingly irrelevant and isolated bricks. Much of our modern world is built upon such bricks. We tend to believe that everything can be seen through the lens of inevitability. The war on terror seems to be the inevitable result of the Cold War, which itself can trace its origins to World War II, which was seemingly the only possible outcome of World War I, which was rooted in the Sino-Japanese War. We tend to see history as somehow preordained, that of course now that we can see it all in hindsight, that it really only could have happened the way it did. But that's not always the case. Pull one brick here, or add one more there, or paint this one a different color, and the results could wind up drastically different. And nowhere is this more evident than in the topic of our upcoming series. What do you think of when you think of China? The Great Wall? Distinctive fashion? How about communism? When you think of China, is the first thing that pops into your head an image of Big Brother, hovering over you so not so vaguely threateningly? Do you get an impending sense of dread? Do you read articles about how China will be the next great global superpower? That their ascent is unavoidable and inevitable? That with every passing day, we're getting weaker and they're getting stronger? Is that how you see them? What do you think of when you think of China? Before you answer that, think very hard about this next question. What do you actually know about China? What do you know of its history, how it came to be, where it is now? Maybe now and then you occasionally see news articles and stories about China in our modern times, from the somewhat comical, namely that Winnie the Pooh is banned, to the horrifying, namely accounts of Uyghur detention and internment camps, to the far-reaching, as in the no longer just creeping influence it wields over Hong Kong. Whatever way you may learn or interact about or with China, in all the myriad ways they affect us geopolitically and commercially, always remember that it is a country that casts a long shadow over our modern world. But what of its history? When it comes to Chinese history, most maybe know of Tiananmen Square. Maybe you've heard of the Cultural Revolution, or the devastating famines. Maybe you're aware of particular emperors and dynasties, and maybe that the Mongols fit in somehow. That's the quote-unquote history aspect, the part that we've adopted into our collective consciousness about what China is, the Disney and BBC shorthands that leave out all the tiny, less flashy bits. The same goes for many other cultures around the world. If you know about the pyramids and the mummies, but have no idea who someone like Gamal Abdel Nasser is, then you can't exactly claim to be an expert in all things Egypt. Brazil loves sports and carnival and beaches, but did you know they also had a brutal military dictatorship not too long ago? Everyone likes to talk about China, but what do they actually know about China? What do they know of the dynasties and peoples and rulers that came before. You may have heard of Xi or Mao, but have you ever heard of Yuan Shikai? How much do you know of Sun Yat-sen? These names may mean little to nothing to you if you're from outside the Chinese or Asian spheres of influence, but these men and women, and many, many more, have had more impact on your life and both the history and the future of the world than you might ever know. This is a video series about a moment in China's history that is often overlooked and oft little known to the outside world. This series plans to cover the history and impact, both direct and indirect, of nationalist rule over China. It's a period sandwiched between the ancient and mythologized imperial dynasties of yore and the modern Red China we know and interact with today. It's a story that does not begin in mainland China, nor does it actually end there, but it's a story worth telling and worth knowing if you want to know why China is who China is and why China does what China does. Telling the story of nationalist China is no easy feat. The years have twisted and lionized and corrupted it into a place that exists less in the pages of history and more in the fantasies of fiction. When spoken about, it has the air of a melancholy place, related in nostalgic tones, and often beginning with a sigh and a look into the distance, eyes glazing over as if transported back to a wistful fantasy land that exists more in the realm of wonder than it does with historical fact. The truth, we shall see, might not be that simple or idyllic. This is not an attempt to cover the history of the whole of China, but it's impossible to tell any single story without giving context. I can't show you the entire brick wall that is China over the last 5,000 years, but at the very least, I can relate to you a few smaller bricks to help center you in the period we are about to delve into. There will be a big video or two on the rise and fall of nationalist China, but beforehand, instead of a single long video covering almost 100 years of dense, convoluted, and disparate history leading up to it, I will instead be giving you 5 smaller, more focused videos on important points of interest. 5 bricks on 5 topics to help set the table for our main course, namely Chinese history from the years 1912 to 1949. Those videos are as follows: the Canton System, Opium Wars and the founding of Hong Kong, Foreign Concessions, the Taiping Rebellion, and the Boxer Rebellion. Stick around after the video for more info. And now, with that rambling preamble done, let's begin. For real this time. I want to thank all of the amazing artists who helped contribute to this video, and without whom it would not be possible in any way. Please check down below in the description for links to their accounts. Teabag, Flying Tonk, Ashworth, and Teutonikus Art. Thank you once again. So, going forward, what I think is going to happen is I'm going to try and release a video every so often. If you're worried that it's going to be like I'm going to get bogged down and you're going to be waiting 2 years for this whole thing to be over before we even get to part 2 on nationalist China, don't worry about that. I'm trying to keep everything focused, pumping out 8 to 9 to 10 minute videos about, specific topics, the Canton System or Opium Wars or Foreign Concessions. I'm going to try and keep them very limited, very focused in scope, so we can just build up the context so then we can have our big hour-and-a-half long video on nationalist China. So, sorry for the wait. I'm really hoping to get this out. It's the reason I built up this channel, and yeah, take it easy, guys. See ya.